Be going here shortly. You already dropped it.
No, let me do that.
Lori Braun, is that Lori Brady?
Hi, Lori.
Hey there.
Thanks for joining.
Lewis.
We have an interesting one tonight. Hey, Lori, have you ever heard of Mark Dutroux?
Dutroux.
From Belgium? Hello, Quiet Patriot.
There we go.
And, no, don't. Just leave it. Mark Dutroux, he was a child raping pedophile in Belgium. They got away with it for decades. It kind of reminds me of Epstein or Jimmy Savile. Okay, hold on. We'll get started in just a minute. Interesting stuff, Lori. What the people of Belgium did when the government wasn't doing anything about it. Very interesting. There's about 300,000 people that marched on the Capitol. And this was back in 1996, so we wouldn't have seen it. You didn't have social media back then the way you did now, I wish. And how many people did you say Belgium has?
At the time, around 10 million people. And 300,000 filled the Capitol.
Yeah, the pictures from it, the video from it are amazing. And
I never heard of it.
It actually caused them to revamp their whole law enforcement system, didn't it? It caused them. I saw that
that they did to revamp it and
how they do everything. That's exactly what we need to burn it down and start from scratch. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. This is Ides of July.
Episode 17.
And we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein for obvious reasons, but we wanted to bring up other cases around the world that have had similar things. You know, there's nothing new under the sun, and this Epstein thing going on, it's been going on for decades that he's been getting away with this, and there's some similar, when you see what's happened with Jimmy Savile in England and Mark Dutroux in Belgium, it's almost unbelievable. Lou and I both got really upset when we were researching.
I had to pause. I watched a documentary about this Mark Dutroux in Belgium, and I can't believe we have never heard of this guy until this week.
Right.
I had to step away and just kind of regroup. It's horrible, and who knows what we're going to find out about Epstein.
Right.
Even more than what we found out so far.
Because let's be real. They're still not really being upfront with us about Epstein, and like Mike Cernovich said, and just
we got to give a huge props to Mike Cernovich. He started this 2 years ago with that lawsuit.
Right, when nobody was talking about it.
And remember, the lawsuit was about, they sealed everything, which these are supposed to be public records.
Don't even acknowledge.
Yeah. So these are supposed to be public records, and they sealed everything. They'll seal stuff like phone numbers and personal things that you don't want to personally. There's people in indictments that aren't guilty of anything, and they're just part of it. So they do redact things, but they sealed everything.
Right.
And Mike Cernovich said, you can't do this. This is not right.
Right.
So goes out on a limb by himself, and he files this lawsuit.
And months later is when everybody else started joining in and talking about it.
And then a judge at some point combined them all,
Right.
because they were serving the same purpose.
But anyway, with Jeffrey Epstein, some of the interesting things to me are they've known about this forever, and I think it was Mike Cernovich tweeted out today that I don't think he skates this time either.
Hopefully not.
We're not going to let him. Mike Cernovich tweeted out earlier today saying they wouldn't be talking about Alexander Acosta unless Trump had appointed him.
That was good. That was like, it's like, that's, to
And
me,
I have
it's
to
like
wonder
God
what's-
using
God
bad
using
things
it.
for good.
Either he knew and he's just this 4D warfare, this chess
Right.
player, or he didn't and God is using him, because I thought we wouldn't be talking about it if
No.
Trump hadn't appointed him.
No, the media would not be covering this at all.
Right.
If Acosta was not involved.
And so with Epstein, everybody knew going back to the 90s what was going on, and you can't be the kind of money this guy has, and we with this latest appeal from Jeffrey Epstein to serve his get out on bail
Right.
and serve his before he goes to court in his New York condo. He offered up $77 million and some other things. He's desperate to get out.
Right. He's not used to this treatment.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall watching him, in his jail cell. But anyway, you can't accrue the kind of money that he has without what does he do? Nobody even can tell you what he does. You can't accrue that kind of money without outside help or help from, definitely squirming. You can't accrue all that without a network helping you. And he has a network in the media. He has a network in law enforcement. I think somebody yesterday or today tweeted about DOJ officials, 4 of them being involved with the plea deal. Because
Right.
Alexander Acosta said that he was told that he was intelligence. So somebody told him he was intelligence, and I'm assuming that might be someone from the DOJ.
People make fun of his responses in that press conference, but he said he was basically told to stand down. So
Right.
I want to know who told him to stand down.
And furthermore, I'm not going to absolve Acosta of any accountability because, you're a U.S. attorney. You've got a lot of power. And you see that at this Epstein thing, y'all seen the evidence, Palm Beach, and the investigation they did there was like 60 victims that they had talked to, maybe more than that. So you see what he's done, and then someone comes to you and says, hey, it's above your pay grade, he's intelligence, leave it alone. And you just go, okay. That seems off to me. So the law enforcement part of it, and it's just like the Holocaust. Everybody, Hitler's a bad dude. Yeah, he's a bad dude, but he couldn't do it without its network of.
The whole apparatus.
Without the network, you're nothing. You're just some other random pedophile on a.
A lot of people went along with the program.
Right.
And so we've got stories here, and we're going to talk about this Mark Dutroux, and we're going to touch on Laura Silsby.
Yeah.
That for some reason the Clintons have taken an interest in for a couple of decades. And
they're all.
the thing that ties all of this together is the pedophilia, of course, but the way the law enforcement dealt with it. And they come across as terrible at their jobs. They're just they don't know what they're doing, and they're Keystone Cops. But I don't think that's what it is. It's not that they're inept. They know what they're doing, and they're just looking. They're allowing themselves to look foolish in order to cover up a lot of this stuff.
Right.
And in the mainstream media for decades, we're starting to see is that the main tool that the MSM has is omission. What they don't cover.
It's the main tool, but they have omission. They have a way of minimizing. Okay, so I'm going to report on this, but I'm going to minimize the crimes. With
the word choices that they use for describing these things.
Right.
But a huge thing is the stuff they don't even choose to cover, leaving words out.
Yeah.
But whole stories that you never
Or
see.
just like with the in the Rose Garden with the Sebastian Gorka, and then the CNN and people playing the clip, the latter part where Sebastian Gorka is calling him a punk. You know, even Shannon Bream from Fox News replayed that clip and not the whole clip, showing, you know, the idiot, the punk that started it.
Yeah, what kills me, and I keep referring to the old tale about the emperor with no clothes.
Yeah.
These guys are, and these are small e emperors that don't know they're naked. They don't see it. Jim Acosta, this Playboy journalist.
Oh yeah.
Also works for CNN.
That's hilarious.
You can see it.
Have you seen him?
I think maybe a big part of them wanting to cut out the first part of that video is to show how much support he did not have from his comrades. In that queue of reporters.
I didn't even think about
because
that.
He obviously, when he saw Seb Gorka coming toward him, he looked around for his posse.
Yeah, right.
And it was not forthcoming. So
right.
He's a tool.
Oh, he's a tool. He's not quite, as much of a tool as Jim Acosta, or maybe that's just because Jim Acosta gets more coverage. I don't know. But the Laura Silsby, I mean, most of y'all have heard of Laura Silsby, right? She was supposedly a Christian missionary.
Came out of Idaho, I think it was.
Yeah.
And she came into Haiti after the earthquake in January of 2010, and she was going to start an orphanage. She was going to do this in the Dominican Republic. So sometime in February, she's caught at the Dominican border, her and 9 other people.
With
33 kids, and told them that they were orphans and all this stuff, and they were bringing them into the Dominican Republic and going to take care of them. They fundraised for this stuff, and they stopped them, and they're like, what? And then they looked more into it, and 22 of these 33 kids actually still have parents.
Yeah.
In Haiti.
And didn't.
And what is she doing with these kids? And
right.
Lo and behold,
they charge her. They charge her with sex trafficking.
Well, before even that, you've got the Mighty Clinton Foundation is in Haiti to help all these poor people after this earthquake. And Bill Clinton, as a UN Special Representative, one of his first things on his agenda is to swoop in and make a deal with the Dominican Republic not to charge Laura Silsby with basically child trafficking.
Right.
And she gets a lighter charge, and she only gets time served. The rest of the group with her missionaries were released immediately after Clinton spoke with the Dominican officials. And then Laura Silsby, and also in this, Laura has a defense attorney early on. His name is...
I did not know this. Name... Laura, you tell me if you knew this.
His name, I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but it's George or Jorge Coelho. It turns out within weeks he's charged with running a pedophile ring touching Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Nicaragua. I don't know what happened with him, but her first attorney, and he was supposedly a minister too. He says he's a converted Jew.
I didn't know that.
Converted to Judaism. I don't know what. I haven't been able to. It's a deep rabbit hole with all this Silsby stuff. We're going to touch on some
But with the Silsby thing, even if you buy the line that she was a missionary, she was just down there trying to help, and maybe this is all a big misunderstanding. Since when did Bill Clinton got on a plane and flew down there and
interceded on her behalf?
Since when did the Clintons intervene for a Christian missionary?
Yeah. And
then also with Uma Abedin, she was monitoring we learned in the Podesta email leaks that they were keeping track of this story.
Uma was forwarding every news article she ever saw on Silsby to Hillary Clinton.
And then the fact that when they got her off, she came back to the States and went to work for AlertSense, which is the Amber Alerts.
Well, it's a contractor with FEMA, and they handle a lot of Amber. It's an alert system for all kinds of stuff during disasters. But one of those things happens to be Amber Alerts when children are suspected of being abducted.
Right.
And so now we have this woman who is convicted in a lesser way than what it should have been.
I don't either.
No.
There's some strange things going on.
We get into that with
all
Dutroux.
over.
Witnesses dying all
Yeah.
over the place.
Witnesses dying.
Tied to all of these cases.
Yeah. So after Laura Sears, you want to talk about Jimmy Savile or Dutroux?
Let's do Savile.
Okay. So you all know.
How many people, I didn't know about Jimmy Savile until about a year ago.
Yeah.
But this stuff happened decades ago. He died in when? What year?
2011.
2011. 2011, a man that was a big BBC icon for decades, going back to the 50s. Turns out he molested, murdered.
Some say 1,000. He's
hundreds of kids.
He was busy for a long time. But with Jimmy Savile, it was another case of everybody knew. This didn't come out until after he died.
There's even stories of going across 28 police jurisdictions in England.
Yeah.
This man was protected. So who else was involved in that?
Yeah, and this, he was, part of the BBC, big part of the BBC. And
everybody in England has to pay for the BBC, even if they don't even watch it.
Yeah, it's not like CNN where if you've got to sign up for a cable service to willingly.
Yeah, Prince Andrew ties into all this too.
Yeah, he does, definitely. But with Savile, so the BBC, they knew about it. They knew about it. Like, he had the reputation. Everybody knew about it and didn't talk about it. They were afraid to, or they didn't want to lose their job, or whatever. Or they're perverts, pedophiles themselves. But what doesn't make sense to me is this. Jimmy Savile. There's some nightmare stories that go back to the 1960s. His first, 1955 is the earliest abuse recorded by the police. So he has a track record since 1955, and it goes on all the way up the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. You can't do that unless the police own you. So I was going to read something to you. When I was researching this, I was reading a Vanity.
This is an excerpt from Jimmy Savile's own book.
Yeah.
He wrote this.
And it's about his earlier days. It says, it's not as if he didn't leave clues. Savile, who could be threatening and quite litigious, recounts in his book an incident when he was warned by the police that there was a runaway girl in his area. He informed them that he would turn her in only if he was allowed to spend the night with her as my reward. She soon appeared, and he blithely marched her into the police station late the next morning, where he writes, she was willingly presented to an astounded lady of the law. The officeress was dissuaded from bringing charges against me by her colleagues, for it was well known that were I to go, I would probably take half the station with me. Okay, that's from Savile's own words, from his autobiography, and I didn't check. I don't know when he wrote.
What year that was written? Whenever it was written while he was alive, obviously, and he's flaunting
the fact that law enforcement wouldn't charge him with anything because he would take half the police department down.
And left unsaid is what happened to this girl in the night that she stayed with him before he turned her into the police.
And if there's all these victims, and like Lewis was talking about the 28 police departments that were involved, that have all had abuse charges against him, did he own them all? Like, I don't understand the Jimmy Savile thing. Did he own? Epstein had, from the first guy that he bribed, or I think was that the Wexner guy.
Yeah.
And that dude had a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So Epstein had a lot of money.
Power of attorney over his stuff.
I'm guessing Jimmy Savile did too, because he was a big celebrity, but he didn't start out a celebrity when that happened with the 15-year-old girl.
And think of the Jimmy Savile record going back to 1955. He's abusing kids as far back as 55. Up until 2011 in Britain, he's this BBC icon.
Right.
He's a Disney hero over there, basically.
Right, and something else that kind of ties into with the whole Epstein thing. NT Lawyer. I don't know if they know.
A lot of people won't know about NT Lawyer, but
I bet Lori does.
Yeah.
NT Lawyer, is an insider in Hollywood that just has a lot of information and leaks that are given to him about this kind of stuff. And he had posted earlier this year, maybe last year, about the fact that Epstein had a celebration after he got out of jail.
I hear you, Lori.
I know, I do too. He had gotten out of jail and he held a celebration at his house, and George Stephanopoulos.
Who are all the? Think about the attendees to Epstein. Now remember, Epstein is just now in the news for trafficking children, and also remember that the charges are not new evidence. These charges stem from the early 2000s into 2008, 2006, something like that.
Right.
So Epstein's in the news now.
And so when they're having that party, NT Lawyer is saying that he made the mistake of so publicly celebrating after he got out of prison.
After he got out of prison or jail the first time, served his 1 year for this stuff.
He claims
in
in that
2000s.
post that they watched child porn that they had recorded, and then he mentions that, a socialite, which was Prince Andrew, and Pete Townsend.
George Stephanopoulos. Chelsea Handler.
Katie Couric. Yeah. All these
They're
people.
celebrating with Epstein back in 08?
Yeah.
09? 08.
Yeah.
That he's free.
I think it was 2010 when they held that celebration.
Okay.
He served his term, and now he was out.
And just briefly, because we're going to move on to Dutroux pretty soon, is Epstein's sentence. The Justice Department deferred to the U.S. attorneys down in Florida, which, of course, Acosta, who just resigned today from the Labor Department, was the U.S. attorney involved with that. But Justice deferred and didn't prosecute their charges. And they had all this stuff that Epstein has been arrested for and is still in jail for almost a week now. A billionaire is still in jail for what he did. This stuff stems from what they already had when they didn't prosecute.
Right. There's nothing new. Also, he didn't get a no-knock raid or a tip-off to CNN or a perp walk.
They didn't pray to wife out in the street in her bare feet.
They gave Roger Stone the perp walk and the CNN tip-off, but they didn't give that to a child-raping demon. In the 1980s, there was a female victim who told the police she was assaulted in Sauvel's camper van in the BBC car park. The police file cannot be located, and the investigating officer is now dead.
That's another common thread throughout cases is, files go missing. We don't have that evidence anymore.
Or
there's some stuff in Dutroux that's horrible.
There's insufficient evidence.
Here's the one across the jurisdiction, or is that later?
I've heard it shown home and that they referred this. Well, there was an investigation. It was a historic allegation of indecent assault alleged to have occurred at a children's home in Staines in the 1970s, and that they were referred to CPS. But CPS informed Jones that it did not prosecute Sauvel because of a lack of evidence.
Lack of evidence.
Of course. I mean, we saw that all through.
This is the one.
Yeah. So this one, this is from 2013. Scotland Yard labels Sauvel a prolific predatory sex offender after its investigation reveals 214 criminal offenses across 28 police forces between 1955 and 2009. That's huge. That's not the one, though, with the assault. Also, from 1960, this assault that happened on a 10-year-old boy, this boy had asked Sauvel, he was a fan of Sauvel's, and he asked him for an autograph outside a hotel, and Sauvel took the boy inside and seriously sexually assaulted him.
So here's where the media gets into, this is The Guardian.
This is how you can learn from the documentary, Hoax, where he teaches you, how to recognize these kind of things.
Hoax movie. Look at this. But what does seriously sexually assaulted mean?
It means brutally raped. But
even though they're covering the story, they can't just come out and say.
Yeah, this is The Guardian. The Guardian's story, so they covered it and they got this fantastic timeline. Why would you minimize? Why would you pick seriously? I've never seriously sexually assaulted. What do you mean seriously?
Yeah. And you know, a lot of it, like you go back to the Laura Silsby case, and everybody might be, a lot of you guys might be familiar with the Daily Beast. Daily Beast ran some stories back in 2010 when this was going down with Laura Silsby to discredit anybody trying to paint this as a bad thing. They left out a lot of stuff in their coverage. And when you look back at it, they're a holding of a holding company called Interactive Media. Who sits on the board of Interactive Media? One person, Chelsea Clinton.
Oh, that's right.
So I wonder if that might taint their coverage of something that could touch the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton with the Haiti stuff and child trafficking.
Right.
And this stuff's been going on for decades. And then you,
it's sick stuff.
There was something on there that I saw when you were reading.
Or maybe it wasn't this one.
When you were talking about the 10-year-old boy.
Oh.
When you come down, when you abuse the girls at the Duncroft school.
Police file can't not be located.
Yeah, a female victim had told the Metropolitan Police she was assaulted in Saville's camper van in a BBC car park. The police file cannot be located, and the investigating officer is now dead.
That's another
theme.
There's
too many. You can't call them coincidences. It's a theme.
You know, the butler that worked for Epstein. Thank you, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
The butler that worked.
You guys, just real quick, follow @Safe Libraries on Twitter.
Yeah.
He's
doing great work exposing
the American Library Association's horrible stuff.
Right. I lost my train of thought. I was fixing to say something. I can't remember what I was going to say. But
we're talking about the people disappearing. Police investigators.
The butler for Epstein. He died of cancer, of mesothelioma. He was the dude that supposedly had Epstein's. Epstein's place on Epstein Island, and he supposedly had the black book because he said he was keeping it for insurance because
all the names he had,
which I kind of find odd. Who's going to go work as a butler for Epstein?
Yeah, but then you gotta take into account who these guys work for.
Right.
He worked for Epstein.
Well,
it's a rabbit hole with all this. We're barely touching the surface on Jimmy Savile or even Epstein.
But they all have common denominators. They all have the law enforcement covering for them. They all have mainstream media minimizing their crimes until later after Jimmy Savile's dead, and then they can.
Yeah. And then there's people in Jimmy Savile's case, especially they express regret at not following it, further in and prosecuting harder and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's in the Dutroux stuff too from Belgium. So we could talk about Marc Dutroux in Belgium. And I can't believe I'd never heard of this. Especially
Jack Kasovic had tweeted something about Marc Dutroux. Somebody else had retweeted, and he had retweeted their tweet of it.
That's how you saw it, and I saw it too.
And so then I just started looking him up, and reading about him. And the thing that caught my eye was when you start searching for him on Google, that you see links about the White March. And the White March was a march that happened in Belgium in 1996 where 300,000 citizens, and how many people?
A country at the time of 10 million people, 300,000 of them marched on the Capitol, filled the streets. And not only that,
because the government wasn't doing anything.
Union workers across the nation went on strike, and then firemen came down to the Ministry of Justice to spray them with hoses with a symbolic cleaning of the Ministry of Justice because they felt that they were so corrupt. And the reason that these people erupted this way in '96 is because you go back to 1989. So Marc Dutroux is this, often unemployed electrician.
Yeah.
But he's mostly a criminal. He's a small-time criminal that steals cars and sells drugs and stuff. And he's got links into like Czech Republic and stuff in Europe where he sells stuff. people have alleged that there's stuff connections with pedophilia rings going into Europe and Eastern Europe as well. But in 1989, him and his wife at the time, she was his second wife. He cheated with her on his first wife previously. But in '89, they're both arrested for abducting and raping 5 young girls. He's given, I think, a 13-year sentence.
Yep.
I can't remember what hers is. They both marry while they're in prison for this in '89. He gets out in '92, so he serves 3 years for raping and abducting and raping 5 young girls.
3 years.
She's out too. So he's got a history. Going back to 1989 in Belgium, he's a pedophile, and he's brutally assaulted people, he's abducted. So we get to 94, 95, girls start going missing again over Belgium. And when you say some of them are a couple of 100 miles or so apart, but Belgium is not that big.
Right.
So Belgium is a Connecticut or something for us. Small area. So, but nobody decides to put it together that maybe, hey, let's look at this guy.
Right.
Kind of same MO and stuff. So,
I mean, it was to the point where the country it became like the norm. Like these girls were disappearing and nobody was doing anything about it. One of the first disappearance, I can't remember her name, but the police didn't even take it seriously. Like they were like, oh, sure.
The 2 teenagers that disappeared while on holiday on the coast.
Yeah.
And the police told the father, he said, oh, they'll come back. They're found an adventure.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Didn't take it seriously for like 2 days.
And then after that, 2 8-year-old girls, I think it's 8 or 12. 8. They disappear while walking home from swimming somewhere or something.
Yeah.
And they disappear. So then he keeps going. He abducts another girl named I can't remember her name, because she ended up seeing him in court when she's 20.
Yeah,
but he abducts a 12-year-old girl. And by this time, a little background on Mr. Dutroux. He's able to afford 7 small houses throughout this area of Belgium. He doesn't work. And here's a big twist from his first conviction in '89. When he got out, he supported himself through crying and stuff. But when he got out in '92, he convinced a prison psychologist that he was disabled. So Belgium gave him a state pension and also prescribed sedatives, which he used on his victims in the years following.
Right.
So he was being paid by the state of Belgium basically to kidnap and rape girls. And then at the same time, when they start seeing stuff happening, they don't even try to look at him.
They don't even try to look at him, but then all these girls keep going missing, and they just don't seem. The law enforcement doesn't seem like
too concerned.
Like it's urgent.
Yeah, the first thing is, they ran away. That's the first option. Oh, they just ran away.
So when did they find the 2 dead?
They abducted. And while he already has the 2 8-year-old girls.
Right.
He has these 7 properties, and one of these properties, he has made a basement cell where he keeps them. It's a dungeon, and you think dungeon, big place where people are being tortured. No, it's a small cell that's like 5 feet tall, 7 feet long, and 3 feet wide. It's a small, tight place. It's dark and damp.
Right.
It's horrible, and there's 2 8-year-old girls in there. He gets arrested on a different charge with nothing to do with abduction.
Right. It was a car robbery or
something like that, and he's in jail for 4 months. He charged his wife with feeding these girls while he was in jail. He never did feed them, so they starved to death down there.
Yeah, she didn't feed them because she was too afraid to go into their. Because
they would attack her like wild animals. She was afraid of them.
Yeah.
These 2 8-year-old girls. She did go by the property. Remember, he had 7 little houses throughout Belgium. She did go by the property to feed the dogs that were there to guard.
She fed the dogs. Not
keep
the
anybody
humans.
from finding the girl. So they start investigating stuff. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So now he's got the 2 12-year-old girls too, or the 1 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
He goes to abduct before he goes to abduct this other girl, and that's going to kind of break it open because they get seen doing it, and somebody gets a partial license plate. So we'll get back to that. But during some of their investigations, finally the Belgian police look at Dutroux, and they go to his apartment, and there's a locksmith that goes with him, and the locksmith hears children's voices crying through the walls, and he goes, "You hear that?" And the police detective, the Belgian police detective, says, "Oh no, that's not.
That's coming from outside.
That's coming from outside." And the guys go, "No, it's clearly coming."
He swears up and down
from in the wall. And of course, that man's dead as well.
He's
That
dead?
detective, he's dead. Oh yeah, he's already dead. He expressed regret. He said it always haunted him.
What about the locksmith?
I haven't.
See, I don't understand. This locksmith was convinced that he heard children's voices.
And so they left the house and didn't go back. The voices were those 2 8-year-old girls in that tiny cellar.
Crying for help. Help was right there.
Yeah. And everybody claims that, oh, it was too hard to see. It was a secret hidden entrance. There's no way we could have seen it. And again, Keystone Cop, I don't buy it. I don't buy the inept,
no.
Oh, we just didn't know.
And
I don't buy that.
And a trained law enforcement professional who's in there, and the locksmith says, oh, he hears. And why wouldn't you just go investigate? Okay, so maybe you can't tell where it's coming. Why wouldn't you just...
If I were the locksmith, I would have popped my head out the window and said, "Nah, there's no kids on the street.
Yeah.
It's in here."
Right.
I don't know how that went, but I would have pressed that a lot more.
Right.
So let's go back to where he abducts another 12-year-old girl, and he's got an accomplice with this in a van, which he did with this first girl. I think her name was Sabine something.
Yeah, Sabine something.
She was 12. So this girl, they abduct this girl in broad daylight. A witness sees it kind of happen. He didn't see the whole thing, but he gets a description of the van, and he gets a partial license plate. So that cracks it open, and they get to where he is, and they arrest Dutroux and 2 accomplices.
Right.
And they still don't have any girls. So, and I guess Dutroux is probably pompous and thinking, I'm still going to get away with it. He's taunting them in the interviews and stuff. But the other 2 accomplices, they crack. And so then they get Dutroux to crack. He ends up saying, well, I can give you more.
Right.
And he points to a poster on the wall behind the detective and says about the Sabine girl that they've been looking for almost 80 days.
Yeah.
And they figure she's dead because the chances of a girl being abducted being alive after 2.5 months is
right. That investigator said it still haunts him to this day, that feeling when he was alluding to the fact that
these
girl,
other people that he wasn't even talking about at the time
might still be alive.
He leads them to where they are, and you find the girl that's been kidnapped for a week, and you find Sabine who's been kidnapped for almost 80 days, and they actually have footage of these girls.
Yeah, there's a documentary. There's a documentary on YouTube. You can look it up. It's called Mark Dutroux. It's Dutrous, The Beast from Belgium. It's like 45 minutes, but it's chilling. You have to watch it. It also has on there video coverage of the people protesting
in Brussels,
and how massive that was. But when they show the video coverage of those girls being rescued, that's just for me when I was like, oh, I just broke down.
So let's get into the reasons why those people marched on the Capitol.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that that's a nation of 10 million people, and they got 300,000 in the Capitol. Some say 350,000.
The father, it was kind of instigated by the father of one of the victims. I don't think it was Sabine's father. I think it was one of the dead girls.
No, one of the 8-year-old girls.
One of the 8-year-old girls. Did we mention that the 8-year-old girl starved?
They starved
while he was in jail.
Because the wife was too afraid.
That's right. But the father of one of them, when nothing was being done, he helped instigate.
But the equivalent in the U.S., where we've got about 330 million people.
Yeah.
I mean, the percentage, it would be like 15 million people or so, 20 million people marching on D.C. I don't think that's ever happened. And think about this. Is that even with those 300,000 people out of that small country marching on Brussels, justice really didn't happen.
Yeah, because they arrested him in '96. He didn't even go to trial until 2004.
And one reason that the police said that it took so long. It took 8 years to bring this man to trial, is because they had to chase all these false leads of pedophile rings in order to clear everything up so they could go to trial. Which I'm just thinking it was they had to clean up evidence
Yeah.
and lock people out.
Yeah, because even as they were going through this investigation of Dutroux, a lot of people believe that what was going on with Dutroux was much bigger than Dutroux. So they were trying to say,
Well, he brought up that he said that I'm a small cog in this.
right,
And one of his associates was a very prominent businessman in Belgium who had ties to all these people,
right.
and nothing happened to him either.
So they, even as they were going after him, and not really going after him, but they were actually kind of throwing him under the bus to save the bigger.
And here's another thing: is that the Belgian police they had seized evidence from Dutroux's home. This comes from the first case back in the '89 to '92. They had video evidence from him. He made sex tapes with him and his wife. He also made VHS videos of him building the cellar. He also there were informants who told police that he wanted to build a cellar to hold girls in. He even other informants said he approached me to help him kidnap girls, and still nothing was done. It's horrible. He had where was I going with it?
He was trying to create an underground city.
He wanted to create. He talked about looking at an old mine where he was going to have all these thousands of kids under his control, but he videotaped himself making the cellar, and the police had these videos, and they claimed that they didn't look at them because they didn't have a video player.
Maybe.
Which is another almost like a lost evidence.
It's
kind
of like the Hillary Clinton when they got Weiner's laptop and all the emails, and they still haven't looked, or they have looked at them and said, oh, we don't know nothing.
We looked at 650,000 emails over 72 hours, and there's nothing there.
Right.
Also, there were so when you get through all of the prosecution and he's found guilty, his wife's found guilty, and she's out, by the way. The wife who allowed all this to happen, let the two girls starve. She got out in 2013. She's been out 6 years.
Wow.
She served maybe 9 years. She went out. She had to have a place to go to.
He didn't serve 9 years. If they were convicted in 2006. I mean, I know it went 7 years.
So she's been out since 2013. For the first few years, she went straight to a convent, which I find, strange that a Catholic convent would say, okay, let's welcome this person.
Right.
I think it would be okay to say, well, maybe she could stay in jail. On her release, she has to have a place that she can stay at, or she has to go back to prison. So the convent, I think, shut down or something after 5 years. So last year,